Hey fellow babies, welcome back to Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. I am your host, Michael Pachter, and you are my fellow babies. Please, if you are a Patreon patron, be satisfied. Pat yourself on the back. That's really nice of you. Please accept our props. If you are a YouTube subscriber, you are keeping us alive. And if you are doing those things or you are not because you can't afford to, you have a freebie. Your Amazon Prime account will pay, if you link it to your Twitch Prime account, they will pay for this show. They will pay $2.50 a month. You have to redo it every month, so go down into the show description, follow the instructions to link the two accounts. You have to do it every month. So if you haven't done it in a while, please re-up that account. That's free money for Shane, free because it costs you nothing. Stick it to Amazon. You're paying him $140 a year. You might as well get $2.50 a month back in chips for Shane. All right, fellow babies, today's question from YouTube from Donjo for All. What if big publishers moved to smaller budgets for games rather than these expensive 3 to 7 year development costs with high risk? Could it open up the industry to innovation and help it actually grow instead of shrink? Would consumers rebel if they weren't receiving as many games that take 50 to 60 hours to complete? It should be a safer approach, and it could end the current deluge of sequels, remasters, and remakes. What a great question. I'm going to point you to a real success story in the video game industry, Embracer. Remember Embracer? That was their model. We're going to make AA games. And they made a lot of them. Now, obviously, there are games like Space Marine from Saber that are AAA-ish. Games like Borderlands from Gearbox that are AAA for sure, that they had. And they just couldn't make any money on the AA's. And so they ended up shedding all the AAA studios. They're focusing on AA only, but they're also going to continue to do the Middle-earth stuff, the Lord of the Rings stuff. They're a mishmash, and they have not been making any money. The right way to think about this is that all entertainment is fungible. And so that means that if you have 40 hours of leisure time a week, and I'm just making that up, it seems reasonable, 6 hours a day to screw around and enjoy yourself, you're going to consume music and movies and TV and sports and games and whatever else you do. And they all compete with one another. And so a AA game isn't as compelling as watching a brand new movie or as watching the latest TV series on Netflix that everybody's watching, Squid Game. And so AA games are very much like romantic comedies in the movie theater. They used to proliferate. So remember Rob Lowe, he used to be in a lot of movies, and John Cusack used to be in a lot of movies, and you would always have, and Adam Sandler, you would have all these 50 First Dates movies, and they just stopped making them. Why? Because what happened was the cost of making those movies kept going up, and the box office kept going down because there are so many of them, and the movie studios said, well, wait a minute, if we make a $50 million romantic comedy, it might do $200 million in box office, but it might only do 50, and we might not even make our money back. But if we do a $200 million blockbuster, we have a 50-50 chance it'll do $1 billion. And so Disney pioneered that and just started making blockbuster movies. That's what's going on in AA games. The video game publishers that used to make smaller games, like Midway did, Acclaim did, THQ did, 3DO did. Remember all those guys? Atari did. They're all gone. And, there's Atari's on a new rebirth, but the rest of them are gone. Even guys like Warner Brothers Interactive has had a bunch of kind of failures lately. Even guys like Sony have had a bunch of failures. It's just hard. And what the big publishers discovered was fewer, bigger games is less risky, and especially if they're sequels. So when you put out Dragon Age and it flops, you can actually keep your job at EA by saying, well, how could I know that? Because every other Dragon Age did well. It's easy to make an excuse for that. But when you put out new IP like Skull and Bones and it flops, you look like an idiot. So that's the problem when you Anthem from EA. So EA's not making any more Anthems, but they might do another Mass Effect. and that's what happens. So I do not think you're going to get that. I think that video games are getting harder to make because they rely on expensive established IP and sequels. I think you're going to get fewer guys making risks, and what will end up happening is the independent studio every once in a while is going to come up with the Elden Ring or Baldur's Gate 3, and it's going to work. And Baldur's Gate 3, I mean, we can argue whether it's a sequel, but it's not like Baldur's Gate 2 and 1 came out the year prior. I think that the indie guys, I mean, Larian is indie. Those guys are going to come up with like really great games, and we're going to embrace them. And what we need is another dozen successes like that. What's the game called? Split Fiction. Like, that guy makes AA games, and they crush. But in the context of Electronic Arts, it's a rounding error. EA does $7.5 billion in revenue. I think the sad thing I think about Joseph Fares is someone's going to come to him with some big IP and say, you're such a great game maker. And by the way, he is the nicest man ever. But anyway, somebody's going to go to him and say, you're a great game maker, take over the Lord of the Rings IP and make the next Lord of the Rings game, something. And I hope he doesn't get tempted, because he's so creative and so inventive. And, when it Take-Two sells 20 million units, then yeah, you can afford to do it. But you can count all the EA indie titles that have been published that have sold 20 million units on the fingers of one hand, on one finger of one hand. There just aren't that many. So the risk outweighs the reward most of the time. I like EA because I think EA wants to do these. I actually like Sony. I think Sony wants to do them too. And I like Embracer. They definitely want to do them. But boy, Activision sure didn't want to do them. Take-Two kind of flushed its private division studio. They don't want to do it. And again, I'm not making fun of Take-Two. They weren't making money. They made those games and they didn't work. And so the company is just like, why are we throwing good money after bad? They have an obligation to try to make a profit. It's a profit deal. So I don't think there's any chance we go back to the era of AA, fun, smallish games that are low risk, because it takes a lot of them to make one Call of Duty. And if you ever listen to Ubisoft talk about why they can't make a profit, they go, well, we don't have a FIFA that sells 25 million or a Call of Duty that sells 25 million. Our big games do 15. Well, what's that mean? They want to be more like FIFA and Call of Duty and have sequels that do 25 million. They sell 15 of Assassin's Creed, and that's not enough. So they certainly don't want a bunch of 5 million unit sellers. No, so the days of 5 million unit games being good enough, it's over. I'm curious to see what Take-Two does when Mafia comes out. When Judas comes out. Judas could sell 10, but Mafia's not selling 10. No way. And again, no one should expect it to. Borderlands is about the smallest game Take-Two can afford to make. And, they bought that studio. It'll sell 10. It might sell 15 or 20. But they need that. If it does 5, they got to shut Gearbox down. Like, Gearbox has to make a hit because it's an expensive studio. And again, the last couple of Borderlands have done big numbers, so I expect the next one will. I worry about BioWare. Like, is EA going to keep the Dragon Age team, or are they going to shut them down? I don't know. They can't afford to have Anthem followed by Dragon Age. Cannot afford that. So my guess is it's gonna go the opposite of the way your question posed it. I think we're gonna get fewer and fewer of the risky titles, and it's gonna take the indie guys. Again, Joseph Fares, funded by EA, but he did it himself. He's what a stud. I love that guy. All right, well, thank you for joining us on Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. If you are a SIFTD patron through Patreon, thank you. If you're a YouTube subscriber, thank you. If you have remembered to link your Twitch Prime account to your Amazon Prime account, thank you. If you haven't done that, please try to do it again. You got to do it every month. Check the instructions on how to do so in the show description below. It's 3 clicks. Do it. Link them. Shane gets paid. It costs you nothing, and you've already paid for it, so make it happen. Fellow babies, I'm going to be out. I'll see you guys in a week.